What are the issues preventing peace in the Middle East? Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thanks for listening, and thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with biblical prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You'll find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thank you for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. On today's program, Dr. Dave Schnitker will be interviewing Carol Rushton regarding her brand new article, The Arab-Israeli Conflict, Issues Preventing Peace in the Middle East. The modern world has been embroiled in seeking peace in the Middle East between Jews and Arabs for almost 100 years now. Conferences, summits, meetings, agreements, and treaties have all fallen by the wayside. No amount of time, blood, sweat, tears, begging, pleading, bullying, or threatening have achieved the elusive goal of peace between Arabs and Israelis. Today's program will deal with some of the more important issues that are preventing peace in the Middle East. So let's join Dr. Schnitker and Carol Rushton for today's fascinating discussion.
Thank you, Dane. It is a great privilege to have Carol Rushton back on the program today to continue discussing her brand new article entitled The Arab-Israeli Conflict, Issues Preventing Peace in the Middle East. This is actually part 3 of a 3-part series of articles which makes up the Last Days Beacon articles for March, April, and May of 2018. My friends, if you are not a subscriber to the Last Days Beacon, which is our monthly article, or would like copies of this particular article, our announcer will share how to do that at the end of today's program. The Bible states that throughout its history, Jerusalem and its people would be an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, as well as a reproach, a taunt, and a curse in all places. This will culminate in the last days when God will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege against both Judah and Jerusalem. We are in those days right now, my friends, and this series of articles and broadcasts is retracing the path that has led to Israel becoming a burdensome stone and a cup of trembling for all people. Carol is helping us to retrace this path with a series of fascinating articles on the Arab-Israeli conflict. Well, Carol, welcome back to our program today.
Well, thanks, David. It's great to be here again.
Well, we've been enjoying these discussions, and last week we began a discussion on the issues preventing peace in the Middle East between Arabs and Israelis. And as we've mentioned before, this conflict stretches back almost 4 millennia to the time of Isaac and Ishmael. It, of course, has worsened over the last 14 centuries with the advent of the religion of peace, the Islamic religion, as it is called. It also appears that this conflict has intensified since 1948, when Israel became a nation, which was 70 years ago this month. Hardly a day goes by without news of violence between Arabs and Jews, whether it be in Syria or the Holy Land itself, or the Golan Heights. Every day there's another violent episode between Arabs and Israelis. Last week we looked at one of the issues preventing peace in the Middle East, and that has to do with the issue of biblical authority. The Jews view the Bible as giving them divine claim to the land of Israel, while Arabs view the Bible as a Jewish book full of fairy tales. And I think you did an excellent and commendable job last week of demonstrating that the Bible is not just a Jewish book, but it is a true book of history, and demonstrably demonstrates that Israelis have occupied the Holy Land going back 4 centuries or 4 millennia. I'd like to start today's discussion by asking why peace treaties between Israel and her Arab neighbors have failed to secure the peace. It certainly hasn't been for lack of effort, has it?
Not on Israel's part. It's very sad. I mean, I look at Israel as kind of like the Sally Field of the Middle East. Israel really wants everybody to like them. Mm-hmm. The Jews want everybody to like them. They really, really, really want everybody to like them.
Yes.
And it's just not worked out that way. The Arabs have, of course, going back centuries, we've talked about Esau and Jacob and Abraham and Lot and all these different rivalries and things that have gone down through the centuries. And then, of course, you have the advent of Islam. Mm-hmm. And Arabs view, there's a lot of talk about the two-state solution in the Middle East, mm-hmm. and how everybody wants a two-state solution. Mm-hmm. Well, in 1947, 1948, the United Nations came out with their partition plan. Mm-hmm. And in 1947, I think in November 1947, the UN actually voted on it and accepted the partition plan. Now, Israel wasn't real thrilled with that because they were going to be given less land than what they had originally been promised, mm-hmm. but it was better than nothing, and they were going to have their own nation. Mm-hmm. And so they accepted the partition plan. They were happy. Mm-hmm. The Arabs were extremely displeased, mm-hmm. and they rioted. There was a lot of skirmishes and already battles between Jews and Arabs even before David Ben-Gurion proclaimed Israel as a nation on May 14th, 1948. So there's been this conflict. The Arabs have never really accepted the two-state solution. Even when you look at the maps that Egypt and Jordan have, the two countries that Israel has actually signed peace treaties with, they don't include Israel on their maps. It's a Arab state from Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. Jerusalem is called El Quds. There's no nation of Israel. It's called Palestine. All the cities and towns have Arab names.
So in effect, they signed peace treaties with a nation that they don't even acknowledge on their maps as existing.
That's correct. And the treaty with Egypt has been particularly disappointing to Israel. They signed this peace treaty, and of course Sadat was assassinated afterwards for signing the peace treaty by the Muslim Brotherhood, so that didn't work very well for Sadat. And it's a rather cold peace. It's not war, but it's not peace, and the peace that they have is a very cold peace. For instance, when I was there and living in Israel in the 1990s, plane after plane after plane from Israel would land in Cairo, full of Israeli businessmen, Israeli tourists, Israeli businesswomen even. And they would come to Cairo to see the pyramids, which they'd never been able to do, and establish businesses there, have partnerships with their Egyptian colleagues and counterparts. The Israeli planes would return, but they would not return with Egyptian tourists to Jerusalem or to Israel. The planes were full of Israelis. The Egyptians refused, the Egyptian Arabs refused to come to Israel and to visit Israel and to enter into partnerships with, their Israeli counterparts in Jerusalem or any place else in the land.
So the peace treaty didn't change the animosity in the hearts of the Egyptians toward the Israelis.
Right. And the peace treaty with Jordan has been a little bit better, but there's still this, there's not been the reciprocation on the part of the Arab nations. You know, as far as the Oslo Accords are, well, those were doomed to fail. Those were with Yasser Arafat and the PLO. To the PLO, Yasser Arafat and the PLO were kicked out of Syria. Hafiz al-Assad kicked them out because he found Yasser Arafat to be rather a faithless guy. And then he moved when he and the PLO moved into Lebanon. And the conditions there really deteriorated for the Lebanese people as well. Between the PLO and Hezbollah, Lebanon is just not what it was. Beirut used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. And Arab...
it was reduced to rubble in the 1980s. Because of the continual conflict there by these terrorist groups. And there actually were about 120 peace treaties signed between Yasser Arafat and the PLO and the government of Lebanon. And the reason why they were about 120 is because Yasser Arafat broke every one of them. So it's... not a very reliable sort, was he?
No, not very reliable at all. So Yasser Arafat never kept his word to the government of Lebanon, to his Arab brothers. So why in the world would he ever keep his word to Jews? Of course he would.
Now, one of the obstructions that you have often heard through the years as peace treaties are negotiated and warring parties present their issues has to do with land, disputed territories such as the West Bank or the Golan Heights, and you occasionally hear the equation of land for peace, that if the Israelis would just give up certain lands, disputed territories, that peace would finally come. And the way it's posed, at least to my ears, is that the intransigent party, the non-cooperating party, are the Israelis. That if they would just be willing to give up lands in these disputed territories and stop these settlements, etc., that peace would come. What is your view of this whole land for peace equation?
Well, Israel gave up the Sinai Peninsula in the Camp David Accords with Egypt, the peace treaty with Egypt. Did that bring a great peace between Israel and Egypt? No.
It really didn't.
No, and they gave up their big source of oil. The Sinai Peninsula has some oil there, and they gave that up. They haven't gotten a whole lot for that.
As well as buffer territories from Egypt. They gave all of that up. And then they gave up the Gaza Strip. They finally pulled out all the settlements in the early 2000s. The Arabs there promised that they would keep the farmlands and the vineyards and all the things that these Israeli settlements had produced and were cultivating. They said, oh yes, we'll keep those up. Did they? No. They're now training camps for Hamas terrorists. So, and Gaza Strip, they constantly, Egypt is also on this because they also have tunnels around the border of Egypt into Israel as well. And so Israel's constantly fighting a battle of blocking these tunnels that terrorists use to infiltrate into Israel and carry out terrorist attacks. So that hasn't worked out very well either. Now the West Bank, that's another issue because that's actually Judea and Samaria, which a lot of the biblical accounts took place in Judea and Samaria. So this is part of the ancient land of Israel. These are not territories that have been stolen from other people.
No. No.
But that's how it's presented.
Yes. Actually, when I was there in the 1990s, the Israeli media would sometimes run these really funny cartoons, and they would have an American Indian, dressed in his traditional headdress and clothes, and the other character in the cartoon would be the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the American Indian was telling the Prime Minister, this land for peace deal never works out very well.
kind of a historical analogy.
Yeah, it didn't work out well for the American Indian, and it's not working out very well for Israel.
Right.
So land for peace never works out. That's just an old tired argument by Arabs and pro-Arab apologists to try to give Israel to basically commit suicide, national suicide. Because the more land that Israel gives up, the smaller they become and the more vulnerable they become. So land for peace, we would never give up land for peace. Do you think that we'd actually, well, maybe we could negotiate California.
Yeah. We'll give away the western state
Yes.
on the left coast.
Yes. Yeah, but really, seriously, we would never consider, the United States would never consider giving up land in a peace deal. And we didn't do it in 1776, and of course we wouldn't do it today.
And I think of the 6-Day War, which of course brought a tremendous victory over overwhelming odds that included the whole of Jerusalem. And what did Israel do as soon as they captured the entirety of Jerusalem? Didn't they give half of it away?
Yes.
They really did. So Israel has been very generous in ceding lands that they had gained through war, which is almost unheard of in the history of nations. You know, that when you gain something through war, you don't generally give it away.
No.
But Israel has done so, but yet there's still no peace.
There's still no peace. And of course, we know the reason why. Man cannot bring about peace. Only the Lord can.
Right. Well, that brings me to my final question. Does God have a peace plan for the Middle East?
He sure does. And I know that our current President Trump, said in the election campaign that he would love to bring about a peace treaty between Israel and her Arab neighbors, and he's, the art of the deal, whatever. But man is imperfect. He can never bring about peace in the Middle East, especially when you have these outstanding issues and you have this animosity going back for thousands and thousands of years. The only one who can bring about peace is, as you've mentioned before, David, is the Prince of Peace. And when Jesus Christ returns, the prophet Isaiah talks about how the Lord will reign from Jerusalem, and the word of the Lord will go out from Jerusalem, and the holy temple will be there. Ezekiel talks about that, and so does Zechariah as well. That when the Lord comes back, then there will be peace, and He will establish His millennial kingdom, and then the covenant promises that the Lord promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then they will really be fulfilled. And then Israel will no longer they'll be the head and not the tail. And they will be the leader of the nations, just as God has always wanted her to be.
Now, will that come about because of Jesus' diplomatic skill?
Probably not.
Will he be able to do things that Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter was not able to do in terms of bringing them to the peace table?
Well, he's just going to oppose his authority and say, and we talked about this before, he's really the only one who is powerful enough to be able to say, this is the way it's going to be. If you don't like it, sucks to be you. And he will have the power and the authority to be able to do that. I don't know. I'm sure he probably won't say it quite in those words that I've said this, but he will make it known that this is the way it's going to be. And of course, you talk about in Isaiah and Ezekiel in the times to come that there will people will worship him from Jerusalem. They will have to once a year come up and bring presents and worship the Lord. And any country who doesn't, they won't get rain that year. So there will be a great power and great authority to be able to do that. And Jesus Christ is the only one who's going to be powerful enough to be able to have a peace in the Middle East and be able to make it stick.
And that's really the hopeful thing. If it wasn't for the second coming of Jesus Christ and the imposition of peace, because He is God after all, no matter how much people deny Him, there would be no possibility of peace in the Middle East without Christ Himself imposing that peace upon the Middle East, and of course bringing judgment upon wickedness and sin. But really, apart from His coming, apart from His judging sin and ruling righteously, there would be no possibility of peace in the Middle East, or really anywhere else in the world, would there?
No. And you've seen the efforts that man has made to bring peace in the Middle East. They've all failed, and they will all fail, simply because man is imperfect. They can't bring peace to a situation like this. And man never really is able to have peace. There are always going to be wicked people and wicked, evil men who are going to want to seize power and seize power in a way that is unrighteous, invading other countries, killing other people. We saw that with Hitler. And it could easily happen again, and it will, because we talk. The Bible says that there will be the time of Jacob's trouble, when the Assyrian or the Antichrist will rise and seek to impose his own peace plan, around the world,
based on deception.
Based on deception.
So things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yes, unfortunately, but we do know that the God's word promises that will be a relatively short period of time in the history of the world, and at the end of that time, Jesus Christ will return. He will rule and reign from Jerusalem, and Israel will be the great country that God had always meant her to be.
And I can't help but think that that day is fairly close. We are celebrating during the month of May the 70th anniversary of the birth, of the modern nation, really the great miracle of the 20th century, the rebirth of a nation dispersed for 2,000 years. And of course, there's a multiplicity of scriptures that deal with the rebirth of Israel. And so now we're 70 years in, and the Middle East situation continues to get worse and worse. And we don't set dates here at Southwest Prophecy Ministries, but we do understand the course of prophetic events and know that at a point in time, the church is going to be raptured out, and then there will be the man of peace who comes and through cunning and diplomacy will create a false sense of peace in the Middle East for a brief period of time, and then he'll reveal his true colors, and the world will be plunged into the time of great tribulation, which Jesus said will be the worst time in human history. And so as all of these things seem to be moving closer to us, we know, of course, that the day of our redemption draws nigh, because as blood-bought Christians, we will not face the wrath of God. So really, that's the hope for us as believers, is we are very interested in peace in the Middle East and peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. We know that that will only come at the second coming, and that prior to that will be this time of great judgment and tribulation upon the earth, but that we as blood-bought believers in Jesus Christ will not have to endure that time. We'll be watching from the bleachers, so to speak, and praying for the peace of Jerusalem, but we know that they will have to go through a time of tribulation and refining in preparation for their future, a great future, as really the center of world government with Christ Himself on the throne. And so these are exciting times in which to live.
Very exciting things, even though won't happen right this minute. We have some exciting and great things to look forward to in the future for Israel.
And I appreciate your bringing clarity and biblical perspective to this. This is very much at the heart of what we're trying to do at Southwest Prophecy Ministry, and that is to bring sense out of what seems to be a senseless age and bring a biblical perspective to the days in which we live. So I appreciate that. And friends, that will do it for today. Again, Carol has just written this new and very timely article on the Arab-Israeli conflict, and she deals with Israel, with issues that are preventing peace in the Middle East until Jesus comes. I'm sure that you will want a copy of this May Last Days Beacon article, as well as previous issues that will give you a fuller understanding as to what is going on in the Middle East in the day in which we live. And now our announcer, Dane Rome, will share how you can obtain a copy of this new article.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitker. Dear friends, every month, Southwest Prophecy Ministries produces an excellent article entitled The Last Days Beacon. These articles deal with a wide variety of subjects pertaining either to Bible prophecy or Christian liberty. Today's article is entitled The Arab-Israeli Conflict: Issues Preventing Peace in the Middle East. We're offering a complimentary copy of this article to each one who requests it. Simply go to our website, www.swpm.us, and then click on the Bookstore tab. Type Last Days Beacon in the Search tab and order your free copy of The Arab-Israeli Conflict: Issues Preventing Peace in the Middle East. You may also order extra copies to share with your family and friends. You may order 5 copies for $5, 25 copies for $15, or 100 copies for $60. When you order extra copies, you will automatically be placed on our mailing list to receive the monthly mailing of the Last Days Beacon. Well, please join us next week for another Last Days Beacon program brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. And until then, this is Dane Rome, your announcer, saying thank you for listening.